Hello, everyone. My name is Stone, and today we're back with Halo Contact Harvest. I don't know why I'm really into this pompous ass British accent that's almost like a pirate. Anyway, it's a weird morning. Um, Chapter 5 Harvest, December 21st, 2525. A very experienced. Wow. Avery experienced a momentary vertigo as the wagon dropped away from the Tiara. The orbital's artificial gravity wasn't terribly strong, but the wagon still needed to engage its maglev paddles, make temporary contact with the number 3 strand's superconducting film in order to pull itself free. After a few kilometers, the paddles retracted, and Avery's head stopped spinning. Harvest's massy tug was all it needed to continue its fall. Over the PA, the wagon's hospitality computer announced that the journey from geostationary orbit to Utgard, Harvest's equatorial capital city, would take a little less than an hour. Then, from smaller speakers in Avery's seat, it asked if he would like to hear the CA's official planetary introduction. Avery glanced at Healy, still fiddling with his harness a few seats to his left, mainly so he wouldn't have to spend the entire journey parrying more of the corpsman's uncomfortable questions. Avery agreed. Immediately, the staff sergeant felt his comm pad vibrate in his olive-drab fatigues. He pulled it from his pocket and tapped the pad's recessed touchscreen, linking it to the wagon's network. Then he removed its integrated earbuds and screwed them into place. As their spongy casings expanded to fit the contours of his ear canals, the hum of the wagon's heaters compressed into a low roar. In this approximation of silence, the computer began the canned narration. On behalf of the Colonial Authority, welcome to Harvest, Cornucopia of Epsilon Indi. A male voice enthused. Oh. I know, hold on, I need to redo that. On behalf of the Colonial Authority, welcome to Harvest, Cornucopia of Epsilon Indi. A male voice enthused. I'm this world's agricultural operations artificial intelligence. But please, call me Mac. The official CA seal warmed on the screen of Avery's pad, a looming profile of an iconic eagle in a circle of 17 bright stars, one for each UNSC world. The eagle's wing sheltered a group of colonists. Their hopeful eyes were locked on a fleet of sleek colony ships, rocketing along the eagle's upturned beak. The image bespoke expansion through unity, a message that, in light of the insurrection, struck Avery as more naive than inspirational. For every person on every one of our worlds, harvest is synonymous with sustenance. Beneath Mac's easy drawl, I forgot. It's Mac speaking. For every person on every one of our worlds, harvest is synonymous with sustenance. Beneath Mac's easy draw, the first uplifting chords of Harvest's planetary anthem began to play. But what allows us to produce such a bounty of fresh and wholesome food? The narration paused for dramatic effect, and in that moment, Harvest's northern pole rose above the edge of the viewport in the wall opposite Avery's seat. A patch of iceless, deep blue sea, cupped by a gently curving coast. 2 words, Matt continued, answering his own question. Geography and climate. The Eta supercontinent covers more than 2/3 of Harvest, creating an abundance of arable land. 2 low salinity seas, Huggin in the north and Munin in the south, are the planet's main source of... Healy tapped Avery's shoulder, and the staff sergeant pulled one of his earbuds. You want anything? The corpsman asked, nodding at a row of food and dispensers beneath the viewport. Avery shook his head. No. I apologize. Brief intermission. The creature always comes first. Healy bounded over Avery's legs and pulled himself along the seats to the end of the row. There was enough gravity in the wagon that Healy could perform a controlled fall down a set of stairs, pull himself along the railing, and make it to an open social area before the dispensers. But when the corpsman tried to walk, his legs slipped out from under him, and he fell backward onto his outstretched hands. Avery detected a hint of volition in Healy's buffoonery, as if he were playing for laughs. If so, it worked. Some of the Tiara's maintenance techs, sitting in the tiered seats to Avery's right, clapped and whistled as the corpsman struggled to regain his feeding. Healy shrugged and offered a shy, "What you gonna do?" smile, then continued toward the dispensers. Avery frowned. Healy was the kind of soldier he would have liked when he first joined the Marines. A joker, a troublemaker, the kind of recruit that actually seemed to enjoy bearing the brunt of drill instructors' wrath. But there weren't many jokers in Avery's part of the Corps, and as much as Avery hated to admit it, he had grown so accustomed to the pervasive grimness of the other NAVSPEC War Marines fighting the insurrection that he had a hard time relating to anyone that didn't share their no-nonsense approach to soldiering. 86% of ETA is... 86% of ETA is within 500 meters of sea level, Matt continued. In fact, the only real major change in elevation occurs along the Bifrost, what you call an escarpment, that cuts the continent on a diagonal. Have a look. Should be able to see it now, just west of Utgard. Avery removed his remaining earbud. The view now spoke for itself. He could just make out the Bifrost's northeastern tip beneath a skein of cirrus clouds, a bright fall of limestone shale that started in the northern plains just south of the Hugon Sea and cut southwesterly toward the equator. Because of the viewport's orientation, Avery couldn't see directly down, but he could imagine the view, a low-slung semicircle of the Tiara's 7 sunlit strands angling toward Utgard. Many minutes passed, and then the viewport filled with a patchwork of pastoral colors, yellows and greens and browns. An enlarging grid of fields crisscrossed with silver lines. Avery correctly assumed these were part of a maglev train system, 7 main lines heading out from depots at the base of each of the elevators, dividing into smaller branch lines like veins in a leaf. The wagon's computer came back over the PA to alert its passengers to return to their seats for deceleration into Utgard. But the technicians continued drinking beer from the dispensers with Healy as the first of the capital's buildings rose into view. The skyline wasn't spectacular. There were only a few dozen towers, none more than 20 stories high. But the buildings were all modern glass-shrouded designs, evidence that Harvest had come a long way since Avery's last visit. When he'd made his hit, the city wasn't much more than a few blocks of polycrete prefabs, and the whole colony had a population of 50, maybe 60,000 residents. Checking his compad one more time before putting it away, he learned that the number had grown to a little more than 300,000. Suddenly, the buildings disappeared and the wagon darkened as it dropped into the number 3 Strands Anchor, a ponderous polycrete monolith connected to a vast warehouse where dozens of cargo containers waited to ascend. Avery waited for the techs to clear the wagon, then joined Healy at the luggage bin. They retrieved their duffels and emerged from the Anchor's passenger terminal, eyes blinking in Epsilon Indy's afternoon light. "Ag worlds," Healy grumbled. "Always hotter than shit." Utgard's thick equatorial air had instantly maxed the wicking properties of their uniforms. The fabric clung to the smalls of their backs as the 2 soldiers tromped west down a flagstone ramp to a broad, tree-lined boulevard. A white and green sedan taxi-idled against the boulevard's curb. The stripe of the holotape across its passenger side door flashed the simple message, "Transport, Johnson, Healy." "Open up," Healy hollered, banging a fist on the taxi's roof. The vehicle raised its gull-wing doors and popped its trunk. Bags stowed, Avery settled into the driver's seat, and Healy took shotgun. Fans hummed inside the dashboard, and a frigid blast of attacked the humid air. "Hello," the sedan chirped as it pulled into the boulevard's sparse traffic. "I have been instructed to take you to—" There was a pause as it prepared a concentrated... concatenated? Concatenated response. I am fucking stupid. Concatenated response. Colonial Militia, Garrison, Glansham Highway. Exit 29. Is that correct? Healy licked the sweat from his upper lip. He'd managed to drink a decent amount of beer during the wagon's descent, and his words came out a little slurred. "Yeah, but we need to make a stop. 113 Noble Avenue." "Confirmed. 113... "Belay that," Avery barked. "Continue pre-confirmed route." The sedan slowed, momentarily confused, then turned left down a boulevard that bordered the northern edge of a long grassy park, Utgard's Central Mall. "What do you think you're doing? One of the techs told me about a place with really friendly ladies, and I figured before we..." Avery cut Healy short. "Car, I'm driving. Do you assume all liability for..." "Yes, and give me a map." A compact steering wheel unfolded from a compartment in the dash. Avery clamped it tight with both hands. "Manual control confirmed," the sedan replied. "Please drive safely." As Avery thumbed a pressure pad in the wheel that linked to the sedan's accelerator, a ghostly grid of the surrounding street appeared on the inner surface of the windshield. Avery instantly memorized the route. "Kill the map and lower the goddamn AC." The fan slowed and the humidity began to slink forward. Cowed, but not beaten. "Look, Johnson," Healy sighed, rolling up his shirt sleeves. "You're new to this, so let me explain. There are only a couple reasons to do CMT. First, it's very hard to get shot. Second, it's the best way I know to sample all kinds of colonial tale." Avery changed lanes without warning. Healy swung hard against the passenger side door. Corman righted himself with a petulant sigh. "A uniform will get you killed in Eridanus, but out here, it'll get you laid." Avery forced himself to breathe a slow 3-count and eased his thumb off the accelerator. To his left, a fountain in the center of the mall shot plumes of water high into the air. The mist carried across the boulevard, turning the sedan's dusty windshield into a mottled, muddy mess. The wipers came on automatically and quickly cleared the view. "My uniform means the same wherever I go," Avery said calmly. "It tells people I am a Marine. Not some Navy squid who has never once been shot at, let alone fired around at someone else. My uniform reminds me of the UNSC Code of Conduct, which has very clear restrictions on the consumption of alcohol and fraternization with civilians." He waited for Healy to sit a little straighter in his seat. "Most important, my uniform reminds me of the men who are no longer alive to wear it." Avery's mind flashed with memory. The ghostly outlines of a squad of Marines inside a restaurant, rendered bright white by a drone's thermal camera. He took his eyes off the road, stared straight at Healy. "You disrespect the uniform, you disrespect them. You hear me?" Corman swallowed dryly. "Yeah, I hear you. And from now on, my name is Staff Sergeant Johnson. Understood?" "I got it." Healy grimaced and shifted to look out his window. He didn't need to say what else was on his mind. Avery clearly saw, "I got it, asshole," in the way he locked his arms across his chest. As the sedan neared the end of the mall, Avery sped through an intersection past the imposing granite edifice of Harvest Parliament. The eye-shaped building was surrounded by a low ironwork fence and well-manicured gardens. Its roof was thatched with sun-bleached wheat straw. Avery had meant everything he said, but he also regretted it. He and Healy were essentially the same rank, but he'd just ordered him around like a raw recruit. And when did I become such a hypocrite? Avery wondered, tightening his grip on the wheel. His 3-day bender back in the zone wasn't the first time he'd ended up drunk in uniform. Avery was preparing to deliver a terse apology when Healy muttered, "Oh, and Staff Sergeant? When you get a chance, pull over. Petty Officer First Class Healy needs to puke." 3 silent hours later, they were down to the Bifrost and well out onto the plain of Ida. Epsilon Indy was setting in a pink and orange wash above the perfectly straight 2-lane highway. Because of Harvest's small diameter, the horizon had a slight but noticeable curve, a bow in the fields of ripening wheat that had sprung up from the Ida after many hundreds of kilometers of fruit orchards. Avery had the sedan windows down, and the air billowing through the cabin was no longer unbearably hot. The Earth-relative UNSC military calendar said that it was December, but on Harvest, it was the height of summer, the middle of the growing season. As the last of Epsilon Indy's rays slunk below the horizon, it got very dark very quickly. There were no lights along the highway and no settlements in sight. Harvest had no moon, and while some of the system's 4 other planets shone unusually close, the reflected starshine wasn't enough to light the way ahead. As the sedan's headlamps came on, Avery spotted the exit marker and turned north off the highway. The vehicle shuddered as it bit into the loose gravel of an upward-sloping drive. A few gentle turns through the wheat, and they reached a parade ground surrounded by very new, single-story polycrete buildings. Mess hall, barracks, motor pool, and triage. The same rigid footprint Avery had seen many times before. As he circled the sedan around the parade ground's flagpole, its headlights illuminated a man sitting on the mess hall steps, smoking a cigar. The scent wafting through the vehicle's windows was instantly recognizable. Sweet William. The preferred brand of pretty much every officer in the Corps. When Avery brought the sedan to a stop and stepped out, he was quick to salute. At ease. Captain Ponder took a long drag from his cigar. Johnson and Healy, correct? Yes, sir. The 2 soldiers replied together. Ponder rose slowly from the steps. Good to have you. Let me help you with your gear. That's all right, sir. Only got the 2 bags. Travel light, first to fight, the captain smiled. Adjusting for the steps, Avery could tell Ponder was a few inches shorter than he was, and a little less broad in the shoulders. He guessed the captain's age was somewhere north of 50, but with his buzz-cut, salt-and-pepper hair and well-tanned skin, he looked as vital as a man half his age, except for the fact that he was missing his right arm. Avery noted that the sleeve of Ponder's fatigue shirt was cuffed to a phantom elbow and pinned neatly to his side. Then, he stopped staring. He'd seen plenty of amputees, but it was rare to meet an active-duty Marine that wasn't fitted with a permanent prosthetic. Ponder nodded toward the sedan. Sorry about the civilian vehicle. Warthogs were supposed to be here a week ago. Shipping delay, if you can believe it. Got my other platoon leader in Utgard, trying to track him down. What about the recruits? Avery asked, pulling the duffels from the sedan. Monday. We've got the whole weekend to set up shop. Avery shut the trunk. As soon as he stepped away, the vehicle reversed around the flagpole and traced its furrows back down to the highway. Which platoon is mine? Avery asked. First. Ponder pointed his cigar at one of the 2 barracks on the southern edge of the parade ground. Healy hefted his duffel onto the shoulder. You got me bunking with the grunts, sir? Just until you clear space and triage. Someone in logistics ordered a shitload of supplies. Must have confused this garrison with some CSH on tribute. Healy chuckled. Avery did not. He was all too familiar with the kind of casualties a combat support hospital received. Mess hall dispensers are working if you want anything, the captain continued. Otherwise, get some rest. I've scheduled a briefing for 0730 to go over the training schedule. Make sure we kick off the first phase right. Anything else for tonight, sir? Avery asked. Ponder clamped his cigar tightly in his teeth. Nothing that can't wait until morning. Avery watched the ashen tip of Ponder's cigar flare in the darkness. Then he saluted and marched off to 1st Platoon's barracks, Healy trailing behind through the shifting gravel. The captain watched them traverse the pools of light cast by the parade ground's elevated arc lights. Some things, he knew, couldn't wait. Ponder tossed his cigar and ground it with his boot. Then he took his own path to his private quarters adjacent to the motor pool. Half an hour later, Avery was unpacked. All his gear was neatly stowed in a wall locker in his platoon leader's rack. A small room at the front of the barracks to one side of its screen door entrance. He could hear Healy at the back of the barracks, still pulling items from his duffels, humming to himself as he arranged them on his bed. "Hey, Staff Sergeant Johnson," the corpsman shouted. "You got some soap?" Avery gritted his teeth. "Check the showers." As painful as it was to have Healy now taking pleasure in Avery's previous order, tossing his formality back in his face, the staff sergeant was glad that he could hear the corpsman through the walls of his room. Avery knew from experience that a large part of drill instructor's job was simply keeping exhausted recruits from taking their frustrations out on one another. To be the focus of their anger and, if he did his job right, their eventual admiration. But Avery also knew that some days his platoon would return to the barracks pissed off and itching for a fight, precisely because he'd ground them down. At least he'd be able to hear any commotion from his rack and be able to break it up before things got out of control. "Look, it's only one night," Healy continued in a consolatory tone. "If I can't get triage ship-shape tomorrow, I'll just bunk with what's-his-name." "You mean the captain?" Avery asked, threw a brown wool blanket over his bed. Regardless of the heat, he needed to show his recruits how to make a proper bed. "No, the other platoon leader. Hang on, I'll check my comm." Avery smoothed the blanket with wide sweeps of his palms. Then he started on the corners, tight hospital folds that would have made his own drill instructor proud. "Byrne!" Healy hollered. "Staff Sergeant Nolan Byrne." Avery froze, his hands stuffed halfway under his mattress. The open coils of the bed frame bit into his palms. "You know him?" Avery completed the corner. He stood and reached for his pillow in case. "Yes." "Huh. Did you know he was going to be here?" "No." Avery stuffed the pillow with a practiced thrust. "You two friends?" Avery wasn't quite sure how to answer that. "I've known him a long time." "Oh, now I get it." Healy's voice changed pitch, signaling an incoming jibe. "You lovebirds started spending too much time together, and I might get jealous." Avery heard the corpsman snicker, then run the zipper of his duffel. "So what do you think the story is with the captain's arm?" But Avery didn't answer. He was focused on the loudening growl of a Warthog light reconnaissance vehicle's engine as it raced up from the highway. The Warthog came to a hasty stop outside the barracks doors. Its engine roared and died, and soon Avery heard the crunch of approaching boots. Quickly, Avery paced to his locker, parted his neat piles of shirts and pants, and removed a patent leather belt with a bright brass buckle stamped with the UNSC eagle and globe emblem. Behind him, the barracks doors swung open. Avery felt a chill on the back of his neck. "That's a well-made bed," Staff Sergeant Burns said. "After a month in the hospital, you get an eye for that sort of thing." Avery coiled his belt tight enough to hide it in the palm of his hand, shut the locker, and turned to face his former fellow squad leader. Byrne no longer wore the helmet with silver mirrored visor he had on the day Avery failed to shoot the Any woman in the restaurant. The day Byrne had lost all members of his squad. But he might as well have had it on. His ice blue eyes were just as impenetrable. "Because of all the changes," Byrne explained with a sneer. That was more Scottish than it was. "Piss and shite all over the sheets because I was too dope to control myself. When the nurses gave me new ones, they'd always tuck them in too tight or not tight enough." "Good to see you, Byrne." "But that," Byrne continued, ignoring Avery's greeting, "that's a well-made bed." Fresh pink scars crinkled the Irish staff sergeant's already rugged face, evidence that his helmet's visor had shattered in any blast. A jagged stitch from a shrapnel injury ran from his left temple up and over his ear. His black hair must have burned completely away. Even though it was cut regulation short, Avery could see it was coming back in patches. "I'm glad you're all right," Avery said. "Are you now?" Byrne's brogue had begun to thicken. After years of soldiering together, Avery understood exactly what that meant, but he wanted Byrne to know one thing. They were all good men. "I'm sorry." Byrne shook his head. "Not sorry enough." For such a large man, Byrne moved with amazing speed. He sprung at Avery, arms wide, and slammed him back against the locker. He locked his hands behind Avery's back and squeezed, threatening to break his ribs. As much as it hurt, Avery sucked in a breath, and brought his forehead crashing down on Byrne's nose. Byrne grunted, his grip faltered, and he staggered back. In a flash, Avery ducked around behind him, belt stretched between his hands. He looped it over Byrne's neck and pulled it tight. Byrne's eyes widened. Avery wasn't trying to kill his fellow Marine, just get him under control. Byrne outweighed him by at least 20 kilos, and Avery wanted him out for the count as quickly as possible. But Byrne wasn't about to let that happen. With a strained but mighty cry, he reached over his shoulders and grabbed Avery's wrists, leaned forward and brought Avery high on his back. Then Byrne proceeded to slam Avery against the room's wooden walls with such force that the painted plywood began to splinter. Avery's teeth shuddered. He tasted blood in his mouth. But every time Byrne leaned forward for another backward thrust, Avery tightened his belt. Byrne began to wheeze. Avery could see the veins in his neck, and his ears began to purple. But an instant before Byrne lost consciousness, he brought the heel of his boot up between Avery's legs, right into his unprotected groin. In the few seconds before he seized up, Avery hooked a foot around Byrne's shins and tripped him onto his bed. Byrne fell short, cracked his forehead on the bed frame, and went limp. As Avery rolled him over, raised a fist to finish the job, a debilitating ache spread from his groin to his arm. Byrne's eyes blinked, trying to clear away the blood flowing from a jagged cut. And Avery threw a half-speed punch, but Byrne was only dazed. He raised a massive hand and caught Avery's fist in his iron grip. "Why didn't you take the shot?" Byrne grunted. "There were civilians," Avery groaned. Byrne slammed his other palm into Avery's gut, bunching his fatigued shirt into his fist. With a powerful thrust of his hips, he flipped Avery over his shoulders towards the barracks door. The air exploded from Avery's lungs as he landed flat on his back in the narrow hallway outside his rack. "You had an order," Byrne growled, rising to his feet. Avery's chest heaved as he picked himself off the floor. "There was a kid. A boy. What about my team?" Byrne lumbered toward Avery and threw a high right jab, but Avery blocked it with his left forearm and countered with a powerful right-hand swipe. As Byrne's head snapped sideways, Avery brought a knee up into his kidneys, but Byrne collapsed against the blow and drove him back against the hallway wall. Avery felt his left shoulder dislocate, then pop back into place. He blinked his eyes against the pain, giving Byrne an opening. The other staff sergeant quickly throttled him around the neck. "They taught you how to be a killer, Avery. They taught us both." Byrne slid him up the wall until his boots were twitching half a meter off the floor. The barracks fluorescent lights seemed to dim, and Avery saw stars. He tried to kick himself free, but it was no use. "You can't hide from that," Byrne sneered. "And you sure as hell can't hide from me." Avery was about to pass out when he heard the metallic snap of someone working a pistol slide. "Staff Sergeant Byrne," Captain Ponder said firmly. "Stand down." Byrne tightened his grip on Avery's throat. "This is private business." "Drop him, or I shoot." "Bullshit." "No, Marine." The captain's voice was deadly calm. "It most certainly is not." Byrne released his hands. Avery dropped and slumped back against the wall. Gasping, he looked toward the barracks door. The captain held an M6 service pistol and a prosthetic replacement for his missing arm. Avery could see the bright titanium joints that were Ponder's fingers and the carbon fiber weave of his forearm musculature. "I know the numbers," Ponder said. 38 civilian casualties, 3 of your unit KIA. But I also know Staff Sergeant Johnson is not in the stockade, nor was he charged with any misconduct. And as far as I'm concerned, that's all anyone needs to know. Byrne tightened his fists, but left them at his sides. "You're angry. I understand that. But this ends tonight." Ponder shifted his gaze to Avery. "Got anything else? Now's the time." "Sir. No, sir." Avery's voice was hoarse. Ponder's eyes snapped to Byrne. And you? Without a moment's pause, Byrne smashed a fist into the side of Avery's face. Avery dropped to a knee. That should do it, Byrne grunted. Avery spat a mouthful of blood onto the barracks floor. He hadn't run, but Byrne had followed. Gotten transferred away from Trebuchet just like him. Avery knew something wasn't right, and that filled him with more anger than any sucker punch. Last chance, Johnson, Ponder said. Avery rose and slugged Byrne hard enough to snap his head past his shoulder. One of Byrne's teeth skipped along the floor and came to rest near Healy. The corpsman had made his way forward from his bunk, hefting one of his boots like a club, apparently trying to break up the fight on his own. Jesus, Corpsman whispered, staring down at the tooth. We're finished. Ponder lowered his pistol. That's an order. Yes, sir. Yes, sir, Avery and Byrne said together. The captain gave each staff sergeant a final, emphatic glance, then marched down the barracks steps. The screen door banged shut behind him, creaked back on its hinges, came to a rattling rest. I'm not rated for oral surgery, Healy said lamely in the silence that followed. He knelt and picked up Byrne's tooth. Doesn't matter. What's done is done. Byrne locked Avery's wary stare. He sucked at the bloody hole of his missing canine. But this is so I don't forget. With a slow rotation of his massive frame, Byrne followed Ponder into the night. I'm going to triage, Healy announced. Good, Avery replied, rubbing his jaw. The way he felt, last thing he wanted was Healy keeping him awake with more conversation. To grab a med kit, then I'm coming right back. Avery huffed as Healy walked past. Sure you still want to bunk with me? Corpsman paused in the doorway. For the first time, Avery recognized the soothing appeal of his near-perpetual grin. You're a piece of work, Johnson. Healy jerked his chin at Byrne's fading footfalls. But that guy? He'd probably kill me in my sleep. Chapter 6. That was a really long chapter. That was a good chunk of time. Oh my God. Oh. Solid book. I like that there's immediately action, even if it's like UNSC versus IDIs, UNSC officer versus UNSC officer, but it's good. It's really fucking solid. It's solid. Good ass book. Anyway, hope you're enjoying it. Please like, comment, subscribe, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.